They didn't notice Earth at first. To the Galactic Empire, humanity was just background noise, another noisy, self-destructive species on a speck of dust. Their empire stretched across hundreds of systems, dominated by generations of precision, discipline, and technological superiority. Humans, by comparison, were impulsive, chaotic, and emotionally unstable. A galactic afterthought. Until Project Gravedigger. Nobody talks about what came before that project anymore, not even on Earth. It started as a fringe Black Ops experiment buried so deep in Earth's crumbling military infrastructure that not even half the top brass knew about it. They were building something, not a weapon, not really, but an idea forged into flesh. A man. He didn't have a name. He'd been stripped of it during the training. They erased everything. Childhood, family, even the concept of home. All he had left was purpose. They trained him in silence, fed him pain like it was air, tortured his body until it rebuilt itself stronger, taught him how to think in patterns, fight without hesitation, survive without conscience, not just against humans, but against what might come next. The off-worlders, the Empire. He was never supposed to be released, but Earth fell before the program could be shut down, not to war, but to diplomacy. When the Galactic Empire arrived, they didn't bother with invasion. They smiled, opened a trade route, and subtly choked every government from the inside. Bribes, technology, promises of peace. Earth bent the knee before anyone realized what had happened. By the time humans noticed they'd become a slave colony, it was too late. Entire cities functioned as resource farms. Earth's children were exported into alien military labor units. Our leaders smiled while signing off on their own extinction. But deep underground, forgotten, and barely functioning, Project Gravedigger survived. And he woke up. He stood alone in the dim blue light of the old facility. Broken terminals blinked around him, trying to reconnect to a command structure that no longer existed. He didn't panic. Panic was something they trained out of him. He read the situation with cold, detached focus. Empire sigils plastered on Earth's infrastructure, surveillance drones orbiting like vultures. No signs of resistance, no signs of leadership, no chain of command. Good. He didn't want orders. For days he moved unseen, observed, studied, calculated, and the more he saw, the more something inside him boiled. Quiet at first, like a whisper, but it grew louder, darker. The Empire had turned his species into compliant machines. Even worse, they thought they had won. One incident started everything. A patrol unit went missing on the western coast. The Empire assumed it was sabotage, a rebellious farmer settlement maybe. So they sent in a squad of enforcers to investigate. They didn't come back either. Then they sent in a dropship. Same result. The panic began slowly. Quiet Security Council meetings, quiet shifts in protocol, quiet demands for more firepower. Then he hit the primary transmitter tower in Jakarta. 1,200 dead. Nothing left but ash. They didn't find a signature. No traceable weapon. Just footprints burned into melted steel. Human footprints. The Empire didn't believe it at first. How could one human take down an entire tower defended by plasma drones, laser turrets, and AI personnel? They figured it was internal sabotage. A rogue tech virus. Maybe a psychic anomaly. So they sent in a Titan. Titans were biomechanical gods, over 12 feet tall, half synthetic muscle, half armor, fitted with hive-linked consciousness and Empire-approved kill authority. A Titan had leveled 6 insurgent worlds in its prime. This one lasted 13 minutes. His remains were delivered back to the Empire's central command by cargo drone. Every inch of it was scorched. Inside the jaw cavity, someone had carved words into the bone. Send more. That's when the Galactic Empire started to panic. Their sensors flared all across Earth. Dozens of energy surges. Sudden loss of surveillance in 6 key cities. Radio silence from half their scout fleets. They tried to lock down Earth, only to find their orbiting defense satellites turning against them. Someone had hacked their systems. Someone who wasn't supposed to exist. Their databases couldn't even process it. This wasn't possible. This wasn't logical. Empires don't lose to ghosts. And yet, one by one, their elite were vanishing. And behind closed doors, the Empire's generals whispered the truth to each other. We have nothing that can match it. The panic inside the Empire's command ranks turned into desperation. It started with General Vaughn, the one who first requested orbital strikes on Earth's surface to contain the anomaly. He never made it back from his return shuttle. His ship went dark halfway between orbit and the atmosphere, vanishing from the comm grid without even a distress signal. They found the wreckage later, shredded like it had been torn apart from the inside out. No signs of impact, no survivors. Just one strange marking scorched across the hull, a handprint, human-sized, burned through reinforced alloy. After that, they stopped sending their best. The Empire's arrogance turned into cowardice. They sent drones, probes, expendable foot soldiers. None of it worked. Every unit sent to locate or engage the threat disappeared within minutes. No remains, no signals, no patterns. Only fear. The human they'd unleashed, he didn't follow rules of engagement. He didn't negotiate. He didn't speak. He destroyed with purpose, quiet, precise, brutal. No resistance groups, no flags, no philosophy. Just a walking nightmare fueled by decades of training, a lifetime of rage, and the cold discipline to never stop. What terrified the Empire more than anything wasn't just the destruction, it was the silence. He left no messages, no ideology, no demands. Just the bodies of their dead scattered across a planet they thought they'd conquered. They finally gave the anomaly a designation: Asset Zero. Some of the lower-ranking officers began to believe he wasn't even human anymore. They thought he was some kind of planetary defense spirit, an ancient weapon hidden by Earth as a last resort. A myth given flesh. They were wrong. He was worse than a myth. Under the ruins of an old industrial plant in Germany, he built his base. It wasn't anything like a command post. No flags, no control room, no armies. Just steel, shadows, and silence. The floor was littered with salvaged weapons, dismantled alien tech, and broken armor. Everything the Empire had thrown at him was studied, repurposed, and then used against them. He modified plasma rifles to overcharge and explode, turned drone brains into bombs, converted atmospheric shields into localized EMP traps. What the Empire thought were their strengths, he turned into weaknesses. He didn't fight for Earth? Not really. The humans still walking around up there weren't worth saving in his eyes. They bowed too easily, sold their own for food stamps and scraps of alien tech. Their compliance sickened him more than the invaders did. But he fought for something deeper, older. He fought for vengeance. Every time he killed, he remembered the face of the woman in the lab coat, the one who used to test his pain threshold when he was just a boy, the way she smiled while turning the voltage higher. He remembered the officer who handed over Earth's sovereignty like it was a used blanket. The diplomat who bowed before the alien High Council, eyes gleaming with self-importance. The teacher who told him to stop asking questions. The drill sergeant who told him, "You're not a person. You're a tool." Now that tool had no handler, no master, and the Empire was bleeding from 1,000 invisible cuts. When the Empire finally sent a delegation to Earth, it wasn't for control. It was for survival. A highborn counselor named Relvac arrived personally, his face pale and stiff, barely hiding the tremble in his voice as he stepped onto Earth's surface. He met with Earth's remaining puppet leaders, demanded answers, demanded control, demanded retaliation. Instead, he got a message. A small black box was found in his private quarters that night. Inside was the data core of his personal bodyguard, a sentient construct built to survive direct antimatter strikes. The core had been melted, crushed by bare hands, and engraved into its surface was the same phrase burned into the Titan's skull: "Send more." Relvac left Earth the next day. He didn't return to the Council with confidence or reassurance. He brought dread, terror, the look of a man who'd glimpsed something so far beyond his understanding that it shattered his perception of superiority. He told the Council one thing over and over: "We trained for war, for strategy, for control, but this is not war. This is wrath." And as the stars burned quieter, as transmissions from outposts across the Milky Way began to go silent one by one, they finally understood something horrifying. They hadn't conquered Earth. They'd triggered its extinction protocol. On the capital world of Geron 9, deep within the halls of the Imperial Senate, the panic had turned into chaos. Holograms flickered over the chamber table, each one displaying systems gone dark, colonies wiped clean, starships lost without trace. The room, once known for cold, calculated efficiency, had devolved into shouting matches and whispered threats. Senators, warlords, and councillors from all corners of the galaxy sat frozen in disbelief, watching the reports stream in like slow drops of poison. The Empire hadn't faced true defeat in over 600 cycles. There were no protocols for this, no predictive algorithms, no planned countermeasures. They'd never imagined one enemy, one human, could dismantle an empire built over millennia. The word human had become taboo in some systems. On controlled worlds, it was reclassified under restricted speech. Some officials refused to even utter it, referring instead to the anomaly, the error, or the ghost. But none of them could say it without flinching. Deep down, they all knew what was happening. Asset Zero wasn't a glitch in their system. He was the system now. Inside a private chamber below the Senate, Grand Strategist Merrick slammed his fist into a steel wall. Blood dripped from his knuckles, but he didn't stop. He needed the pain. Needed the reminder that he could still feel something besides failure. He had been one of the first to study Earth when the conquest began. He remembered the arrogance of his colleagues, how they laughed at the primitive tools, the chaotic societies, the emotional outbursts of its species. He warned them back then. "They're volatile," he had said. "Unpredictable. The only thing more dangerous than an enemy who hates you is one who has nothing to lose." Nobody listened. Now entire fleets were missing, annihilated, not in war, erased. He pulled up the latest footage from a destroyed outpost in the Halor Belt. No energy signatures, no battle damage, just dead soldiers in perfect formation, heads turned toward the cameras, mouths sewn shut with Empire-issued comm wire. A single message burned into the command console. "This is restraint." Merrick stared at those words for a long time, because he knew what they really meant. Asset Zero was sending warnings, not messages. He could have wiped out those soldiers quietly, but he wanted them found. He wanted them seen. He wanted the Empire to feel it. Meanwhile, on the shadowed moon of Tethra 7, a secret high-level black site had gone dark. It was off the books, known only to the inner circle of the Council. That was where they kept the Empire's worst weapons, biological horrors too unstable to ever deploy, artificial minds sealed in vaults to prevent rebellion, genetic mutations bred for extinction-level protocols. When a retrieval team was sent, they found the moon split in half. Not destroyed. Split like it had been torn open. Nothing remained but drifting debris and a pulsing signal beacon repeating one sentence on a loop across encrypted Empire frequencies. "Do you understand now?" That message echoed in Merrick's ears even in his sleep, because the truth was clear now. Asset Zero wasn't targeting military command anymore. He was targeting symbols, foundations, the core of the Empire's identity. He was unraveling their illusion of control. On Earth, the last of the human governors tried to reach out, not to resist, but to beg. They knew what was coming. They knew that the Empire's collapse wouldn't end in freedom. It would end in fire. They sent a message through old encrypted channels. "We're not them. We didn't choose this. You can still stop. Please, tell us what you want." For 3 days, there was silence. Then the message came back. A single sentence. No voice, no signature, just 5 words. "You had your chance already." The next morning, the skies over Earth's southern hemisphere turned red. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a weapon. It was a warning, burned into the atmosphere like a brand. A continent-sized image, visible to every orbital satellite and planetary scan. The outline of a human skull, grinning. The Empire tried to cover it up, scramble the data, edit the visual feeds. But it was too late. The image spread like wildfire across every system. Even on distant moons where humans had never set foot, they whispered of the thing that rose from Earth and now hunted the stars. Asset Zero wasn't a soldier. He was the end of their arrogance. The fear had reached the Empire's core, and now it began to rot them from within. The High Council no longer sat in unity. Their grand circular hall, once bathed in golden light and ambient energy, now flickered with instability, like even the power grid had started to shake under the weight of their paranoia. Each councillor spoke in hushed tones, their robes hiding twitching hands and darting eyes. No one trusted anyone anymore. They weren't losing to a war, they were losing to an idea shaped like a man with no name. Paranoia spread like blood in water. Councillor Varoth accused General Sorel of withholding classified defense logs. Sorel, in turn, accused Varoth of establishing secret escape routes off-world. The accusation led to a duel. Not a legal one. Not the ceremonial kind. Just raw rage in the halls of power. Claws, blades, screams. Sorel killed Varoth in front of 6 councillors, and nobody stopped him. That was the moment it became clear. Asset Zero didn't need to kill the Empire. He had made them do it themselves. Far across the stars, on the prison world of Crystal, alarms blared non-stop for 16 hours. Not from riot, not from escape attempts, but from a single event that no one had ever considered possible. The security AI had gone silent. Crystal's Warden-class AI was supposed to be unhackable. An Empire-designed consciousness that ran on a rotating memory core, shielded by 10 layers of encryption and a psychic firewall. It was tasked with containing the worst of the worst, the kind of prisoners the Empire never wanted to kill, only to forget. War criminals, mutated generals, ancient enemies, cursed bio-creations. They called it the Tomb. And when a scout ship finally landed to investigate, it found every cell empty. No bodies, no guards, no heat signatures, just the AI core sitting wide open on the main console, humming quietly. There was one message written into its neural matrix. A recorded voice, human, calm, male. "I didn't come here to release them. I came to show them what true prison feels like." They checked every system. No trace of where the prisoners went. No direction, no jump signatures. That was when the rumor spread. Asset Zero was building something. Not an army, a reckoning. Back on Geron 9, Grand Strategist Merrick watched as a dozen senior officers defected from the Empire in one day. Some tried to flee to neutral systems, others quietly disappeared. A few turned their ships toward deep space, hoping that running into the void was safer than staying under Imperial control. One of his own captains sent a private message before deserting. "This isn't war, it's prophecy. You turned Earth into a graveyard, and now it's digging you one." Merrick didn't try to stop him. He was starting to believe it himself. That night, Merrick sat alone in his personal chamber, staring at the only physical item he had ever taken from Earth during the occupation. A broken piece of ancient armor. Human-made, worn, scorched. But it had a symbol on it, barely legible now. A clenched fist. He remembered finding it in the ruins of an old underground training complex. No signs of survivors. Just old burn marks, shattered restraints, empty tanks. At the time, he didn't know what it meant. Now he did. It was the birthplace. Project Gravedigger. He replayed the old intercepted message. The one only 3 people had access to. The one Asset Zero had sent directly to the Empire's central data relay just 3 days ago. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even an attack. It was a truth. Your species thinks in numbers, control, structure, but there are some things you can't predict. You taught humans submission. I learned silence. You took our freedom. I took your fear. You erased my name, so now you'll remember nothing else. The next day, 7 Empire-controlled systems experienced simultaneous blackouts. Not communications blackouts, existential ones. No signal, no life. Just blank zones in space, like the stars themselves had been turned off. Exploration teams refused to enter. Long-range probes melted before crossing the border. Energy signatures scrambled. Even time dilation sensors showed signs of distortion, as if something was bending reality itself in those regions. The Council demanded an explanation. They didn't get one. Because the moment they tried to initiate an emergency summit, their planetary shields failed, for the first time in recorded history. It wasn't an invasion. There were no ships in orbit, no enemies at the gates. Just a message pulsing across their emergency comms. You are not at war. You are at judgment. Merrick stood alone on the balcony of the Empire's spire, watching the sky darken, not from clouds, but from thousands of black objects entering upper atmosphere. Too fast to be ships, too cold to be drones, falling in perfect silence. He didn't call for help. He simply whispered under his breath. So it begins. They weren't ships. They weren't bombs. They were coffins. Thousands of black containers rained from the sky above Geron 9, each one spiraling silently through the atmosphere like they were guided by some ancient hand of vengeance. No propulsion, no signal, no heat signature. They fell in perfect formation, streaking through the clouds and slowing only seconds before impact. The people of the capital watched in stunned silence, expecting fire, explosions, destruction. Instead, each one hit the ground with a dull, echoing thud. No detonation, no sound, just presence. Each container stood upright, matte black, seamless, 7 feet tall, marked only by a single white number carved into the center. And inside every single one, they found a body. Empire officers, commanders, judges, officials, scientists, not recent kills. Old ones. Every corpse was perfectly preserved, even those thought long dead. Men and women who had vanished decades ago, dismissed as traitors, rebels, or political problems. Some had been declared dead by suicide. Others had disappeared quietly under the guise of internal investigations. And yet here they were, delivered to the capital like trophies. One coffin landed directly in the Senate Square. Inside it was High Counselor Revek. He had died 15 years ago in what was recorded as a shuttle malfunction over the Helix cluster. His corpse told a different story. His throat was crushed, ribs broken, hands bound with Empire-issued fiber wire. The recording chip sewn into his chest played back a single audio message. You called it order. I called it murder. Now they all know. That was the first crack in the myth of Empire security. Suddenly, everything they'd buried, every name they thought lost to time, came crashing back in the most literal way. The citizens were watching. Broadcasts ran non-stop, unable to filter the horror, unable to explain the precision of the attack. This wasn't terror. It was revelation. Asset Zero had turned the Empire's lies into monuments. By nightfall, entire districts of Geron 9 had fallen into lockdown. The capital's military arm, the Crimson Veil, was deployed to guard the coffins, afraid someone would desecrate or interfere with them. But none dared. The Veil had trained for every form of warfare. They had not trained for shame. One soldier reported seeing something moving near the primary monument drop. Surveillance drones confirmed nothing. Another claimed they heard whispering from one of the containers. No proof, no recordings, but every single soldier agreed on one thing. They felt watched, not by cameras, not by drones, by him. High Command convened in the underground citadel, their deepest chamber, lined with psychic null steel, designed to prevent telepathic intrusions. It was the most secure room in the known galaxy. That night, it lost power, only for 10 seconds. But that was all it took. When lights returned, a message was burned into the ceiling from the inside. Buried truth is still truth. One of the commanders vomited. Another pulled out their service sidearm and shot themselves without hesitation. That was when they knew this wasn't just physical warfare. This was psychological demolition. Far from the capital, Asset Zero moved through the broken edges of space like a ghost with a purpose. No ship, no crew. He traveled aboard a stolen hybrid jump frame, something not even the Empire had yet catalogued. He had been busy, in secret, learning things no human was meant to learn, absorbing their technology, breaking it apart, studying its soul and using it against them. He didn't want their empire. He wanted it to choke on its own pride. And now that the world had seen the coffins fall, he made his next move. He hijacked the central broadcast node. Only the Emperor had access to that frequency. It hadn't been used in over 2 centuries, not since the first uprising. It cut through every system, every firewall, every screen, every personal implant. And suddenly, he was everywhere. Not a face, not a voice, just a recording of a heartbeat, steady, human, accompanied by words. You taught me fear. Now I've returned it to you. You built your empire on silence. I am the scream you buried, the reckoning you laughed at. You cannot kill what you cannot understand. Then silence, just the heartbeat, until the final sentence played in a slow, cold whisper. I am not here to win. I am here to end. Back on Geron 9, panic became revolt. The people, those who once celebrated the banners of conquest, now tore them down. Statues of past rulers fell. Crowds formed around the coffins, laying flowers, kneeling, praying, not out of faith, but guilt. And deep in the bowels of the Empire's military core, the AI in charge of planetary defense made a single, unauthorized calculation. Threat level, unquantifiable. Recommend, surrender. No one had ever seen that code before. There wasn't even a protocol for surrender. Until now. For the first time in over 500 years, the Emperor addressed the galaxy. Not through a proxy, not through council decree or symbolic gesture. He appeared live. The holofeed spanned every screen, from the floating megacities of the core worlds to the dust-ridden farms on the rim colonies. There was no music, no introduction, no regal theatrics. Just the Emperor, old, pale, skeletal beneath layers of ceremonial armor. His eyes didn't burn with fire. They flickered with something more dangerous, panic pretending to be power. My people, he began, voice low but amplified across systems. A ghost walks among us. He paused, staring directly into the feed like he could look through every screen. We are not strangers to resistance. We have crushed rebellions, broken civilizations, tamed chaos. But what stalks us now is not war. It is betrayal. It is Earth, ungrateful and diseased, rising from its own ashes to bite the hand that fed it. He clenched a fist, but even that movement looked weak. This thing that haunts our worlds, this remnant of a failed species, is not a hero. He is not vengeance. He is a monster forged in the dark by traitors who turned their backs on unity. And then came the mistake. He is alone, he is human, and he will burn. The holofeed cut, and for a full 6 seconds, everything was quiet. No reaction, no rebuttal, just silence. Until every screen blinked again, this time with no traceable source, no data origin. And a voice answered. Asset 0. I was made in darkness, the voice said, calm and raw. But your empire cast the shadow. Across the stars, the image changed. No face, just grainy security footage. Real ones, old ones, leaked footage from Empire archives that were never meant to be seen. Experiments, torture, executions, Earthlings dissected like animals, children reprogrammed in cold steel rooms, human leaders smiling while signing surrender pacts soaked in blood. More and more played, flooding the galaxy with proof. You call it order. I remember it as screams. A still image took over the screen. A young man, strapped to a metal slab, eyes wide in terror. The subject's face was bruised, jaw wired shut. The label at the bottom read, GRVDGR-017//Emotion Suppression Phase 3. It was him. Asset 0. But not the legend, not the shadow. The boy, the broken one. I didn't survive to prove you wrong, he said quietly. I survived because you couldn't finish the job. And then his final words cut through the feed like a razor through bone. You built this empire with silence. I will bury it with truth. On Geron 9, chaos erupted. The streets broke into riots, not rebellion, not yet. Shame. People had believed in the lie of peace through control. Now they saw what it cost. And worse, who paid the price. Empire propaganda networks collapsed under their own cowardice, unable to twist the narrative fast enough. Some officials simply disappeared. Others tried to fight back with words, but the recordings were undeniable. The Emperor ordered the arrest of anyone caught distributing the footage. That order triggered the second wave of fallout. Desertion. Empire soldiers began walking away. From posts, from commands, from oaths. One by one, units powered down their armor, dropped their weapons, and walked into the public squares, laying their hands on the ground. They didn't speak. They just waited. Meanwhile, inside the old launch facilities buried beneath Earth's polar cap, Asset 0 stood before a screen of his own. He wasn't watching the Empire fall. He was watching the last piece of his plan come to life. A massive warframe stood behind him, 10 stories tall, half organic, half machine. It didn't look like Empire tech. It didn't look like human tech either. It was both, forged from every failure they'd thrown at him. Its core, a rebuilt quantum mind from the Chryssal tomb. Its weapons, stolen Titan-grade plasma array. Its brain, linked to his. It wasn't just a machine. It was the memory of every name the Empire tried to erase. Asset 0 climbed into the cockpit without hesitation, and whispered the name of the only person he remembered from his past. A girl, from before the lab, before the training, before the silence. Lena. The machine roared to life, and the ground shook. In orbit above Earth, an Empire fleet still stood ready. 40 ships, fully armed, nervous but eager for redemption. They didn't even see him coming. Asset 0's warframe tore through their formation like a scalpel through paper. No warnings, no transmissions, just systematic, silent, brutal destruction. Ships vented into space, command decks crushed, AI systems overwritten mid-fight and turned against each other. It wasn't a battle, it was a statement. From Earth to the stars. You will not forget us again." The warframe descended through the atmosphere like a god fallen from the heavens. There was no resistance left in orbit, only debris and drifting husks of once mighty Empire ships. The silence in space wasn't peaceful, it was funeral quiet. On the surface of Geron 9, alarms wailed uselessly. City-wide shields flickered and died. Defense grids meant to withstand planetary sieges short-circuited before they could even charge. The Empire's capital had been built for glory, not for survival. Now it would be buried in both. The warframe landed with such force that it cracked the obsidian streets of the central plaza, shattering statues of old emperors into dust. Dust just like the legacy they clung to. Asset Zero stepped out of the cockpit, his black armor hissing as it adjusted to the planet's pressure. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He walked straight through the capital gates like he belonged there. No one stopped him. Soldiers stood frozen. Some dropped to their knees. Others turned away, ashamed. He passed them all like they were already ghosts. Inside the Imperial Citadel, the Emperor waited alone. He had dismissed his guards. Not out of courage, but because he knew they wouldn't stop what was coming. They might try, they might die, and it would change nothing. He stood at the center of the grand chamber, surrounded by empty thrones. His eyes, once sharp, now tired, watched the massive doors as they slowly opened. Asset Zero walked in, his steps echoing like gunshots in a cathedral. No words were exchanged at first, just silence, the kind that lives between predator and prey. The Emperor finally spoke. "You're not a man anymore," he said, voice thin and dry. "You're what happens when we leave vermin unchecked." Asset Zero stopped 5 feet from him. "I was a boy when you stripped me of everything," he said. "That was the last time I was weak. You were nothing. A failed prototype, a failed planet." Asset Zero tilted his head. "Then why are you shaking?" The Emperor's hands trembled. He tried to hide it, but he couldn't. The monster they thought they buried had returned, not just stronger, but wiser, cold and impossibly focused. He stepped closer. "You tried to kill our spirit, replace it with your chains. You thought order could silence pain. But pain has memory. And memory, it never dies." The Emperor laughed, brittle and hollow. "You think killing me will end this?" "No," Asset Zero said. "That's why I'm not here to kill you." The Emperor's breath caught in his throat. "What?" Asset Zero raised his hand. A device activated. The room's floor lit up with a sudden hum of ancient energy. The Emperor looked down in horror. Symbols glowed, Earth-made, mixed with Empire tech, a hybrid system far beyond anything in their records. Asset Zero had turned the Empire's own throne room into a broadcast node. "This isn't revenge," he said. "This is a message." The walls shimmered, and holograms burst to life. All over the Empire, on every planet, every ship, every implant, the people saw what the Emperor now saw. His crimes, hundreds of them, slavery contracts, torture authorizations, orders to erase entire families, footage of humans being deconstructed, mind-wiped, sold into genetic experimentation, proof that the Empire's peace was bought with screams. And in the middle of it, standing tall and silent, the Emperor himself. Asset Zero stepped back, watching as the feed played. Not a speech, not a demand, just truth, broadcast like a virus into the heart of their identity. "This is what you are," he said. The Emperor tried to move, but the floor was sealed under him, his throne now a cage, his image projected to trillions. No army, no council, no rescue, just exposure. "You will live," Asset Zero whispered, "long enough to see what happens when the lie breaks." Then he walked away. No blade, no gunshot, no final blow, because death would be mercy. Outside, the people saw it happen in real time. The myth of the perfect empire shattered like glass. The emperor, a symbol of untouchable power, now frozen under the weight of his own past. Some screamed, some wept, some collapsed in the streets, but all of them knew. The monster wasn't the man who walked into the throne room, it was the man who sat on it for far too long. Back on Earth, the warframe returned to the old launch site. Asset Zero climbed out alone, stripped off his armor, and stood beneath the open sky. The stars above no longer looked hostile. They looked silent, peaceful. For the first time in decades, he breathed without tension and whispered to the night, "Now, they remember." He didn't stay to watch the collapse. The Empire didn't fall in fire. It rotted, slow, irreversible. Planet by planet, the machinery of power ground to a halt. Whole star systems declared independence not with rebellion, but with refusal. Refusal to obey. Refusal to forget. With the truth unleashed, loyalty became poison. Those who still clung to the Empire's creed found themselves hunted, not by assassins, not by armies, but by their own people. Citizens turned on their governors. Soldiers turned on their commanders. Old monuments were pulled down, melted, ground into dust. Geron 9 fell without a single shot fired. The Emperor was still alive, trapped in his golden prison. Not physically, he could move, breathe, eat, but he was never alone. The broadcast looped 24 hours a day in every room he walked into. He could cover his ears, close his eyes, it wouldn't matter. The truth followed him like a curse. The last anyone ever saw of him was through a hacked surveillance feed. He was pacing in the throne chamber, muttering nonsense to himself, clawing at the walls, screaming at ghosts only he could see. Asset Zero had given him the one thing he never allowed his victims: memory. Earth began to heal. Not quickly, not easily. There were still scars. Cities still bore the Empire's mark. Industrial sectors powered by alien cores, biotech farms that had grown bodies instead of crops, camps, labs, prisons. No one could walk 10 steps without finding a reminder. But humans had one thing left, something the Empire couldn't erase: defiance. The warframe was sealed away. Asset Zero buried it deep beneath the ice fields, somewhere no one would find it. It was never meant to be a monument. It was a tool for a single job, and that job was done. He didn't take a victory lap. There were no medals, no songs, no parades. He walked into the wastelands of the old world, where the deserts were still too poisoned for colonization, and made his home in silence. He didn't need applause. He didn't want forgiveness. He wanted quiet. Years passed, rumors spread. Some said he died out there, buried beneath a storm of his own making. Others said he became something else. A myth, like the ones the Empire used to create to control people. But this time, it was a myth that reminded them never to bow again. Children whispered his name when talking about fear. But they didn't fear him. They feared what he remembered. In the outer systems, old Empire stations blinked to life, automated warnings flaring from dead consoles. One message kept repeating in old Imperial code: Judgment protocol complete. Threat archived. Rebirth initiated. No one knew what that meant. Some were afraid, but most understood. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning to anyone who dared try and replace the Empire with something worse. Earth had bled for its silence once. It would not bleed again. Because now, in every corner of the galaxy, one memory remained carved into the stars. The Empire panicked, because they had nothing that could match him. Not a god, not a savior, just a man they couldn't break.